Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone love this one? If you know this one, feel free to sing along. I have a feeling that at least half, if not 75% of this room, had better be singing along by the end of this song. Maybe by the end of the first verse, I'm not sure. Just because it's before your time, John. It was before my too. We gotta watch this song over here, no?
move into talking about gratitude, I always remember, and he's probably 30 years old now, or something like that, but a little boy named Dante. When I was living in Dallas and I was at a restaurant and I was eating, and this little boy was just kind of moving around, you know how sometimes he's probably 3 years old, and he had a big cup of soda in his hand. And he was sipping it through a straw. He was moving about and walking around looking at people at their tables. And when Dante got up to me, and I leaned over and I spoke to him and I said hello. And as soon as I said hello, Dante, I guess it was the carbonation in the soda, whatever it was, he let out a big belch. And his mother was horrified. She said, Dante, what did you say? And he looked at me very sweetly and said, thank you. Because how many of us had mothers and fathers or grandparents or somebody else who always wanted to make sure we did what? Say thank you. And even though it was the wrong context, Dante was starting to register. He was starting to remember just how important thanksgiving and gratitude and appreciation and all of that is, just how necessary that it is. And it truly is. And I was reading this quote by the author Melody Beatty. In fact, before we started today, I had put up some gratitude slides, and she says this, and I think it's really important. She says, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. And I thought that was just powerful. Then I found something else by Ernest Holmes that says, when we speak the words of thanksgiving to the God within, knowing before they ask, I will answer, there is something in this attitude of thanksgiving that carries us beyond the field of doubt into one of perfect faith and acceptance, receptivity, realization, appreciation, gratitude, and thanksgiving, the motive power which attracts and magnifies the hidden potentialities of life. It's important to have a sense of gratitude. It's important to be thankful. It's important to express appreciation. It's important because ultimately there is power that is found in being able to express gratitude, power that is found in being able to appreciate. One exercise I would like for you to try sometime, when you find that you are a little bit down, your mood isn't quite what you wish for it to be, rather than getting caught up in that, rather than letting that poison that Julie read about overtake you and make you continue to be in the negative and all of that, take a moment and begin appreciating things. Begin appreciating people, begin appreciating life, just the little things. Because appreciation, first of all, it causes a shift in us. Because we cannot hold those two thoughts that we see something and both appreciate it and despise it. Once we begin to appreciate it, we begin to experience a shift. And as we experience that shift, we understand that our mood changes, that our outlook on life changes, that things begin to happen in us because we are expressing appreciation. This morning, I was up early this morning, about 4 a.m., and as I laid there in bed, I took the time and I began appreciating each and every person here. I saw your face and I started appreciating you, and I started calling you by name in my mind and appreciating you more. And the thing of it is that I began doing that, and as I continued to do the things with appreciation, I thought about how Louise Hay says that, you know, a very simple thing, if nothing else to start your day off, be appreciative for the bed. And then appreciate the covers and the sheets that are on your bed. And then begin to appreciate the walls in your room and the roof over your head. And as you continue to appreciate, what happens is that you get a great and being able to do that. The second thing, that when we begin to appreciate things, when we begin to show a sense of thankfulness and all the things that are there, when we begin to do that, what happens is that it increases our self-esteem. A lot of us take a look in the mirror, and as soon as we do, we find something wrong. You know, the wrinkles, the gray hair, the extra pounds, the cellulite, the teeth that are crooked, the whatever it might be, those kinds of things. But what if we for just one moment would look and appreciate our bodies for what they are? Magnificent, magnificent expressions of God. If we just took the moment to look in the mirror and see ourselves for who we really are, not the standards that the world gives us, but to appreciate who we are, it begins to make things happen. Think about it for a moment. The word appreciation itself means what? To increase in value. And when we begin appreciating ourselves, we increase the value that we feel about ourselves. And when we increase the value that we feel about ourselves, then it helps us as we navigate and we negotiate with those around us. But it's important to understand there's power in appreciation. And then another way in which appreciation has power is that it makes us magnetic for the things that we wish to have happen in our lives. If we start to appreciate what we have now, then even more comes. If you think about in the scriptures the parable of the talents, how the 3 men that were given the talents, and the ones who appreciated what they had, that they took it and they did something with it and they caused it to increase, they received even more. The one who buried it, if you will, who did not appreciate it, he was the one that found it taken away from him. There's power in appreciating. If we appreciate the little things, one of the things I like that Melody Bailey says is that appreciation can turn a meal into a feast. And I thought about that. You know, sometimes people want to make a show of being out in public and saying grace before they're eating, when for me it's just simply about being grateful that the meal and the food is before me. But it took me back to years ago when I was at a period and a point in my life where I wasn't feeling particularly abundant and I wasn't feeling particularly good about things and all of that. And I happened to be traveling out of town for a conference, and I was in Atlanta, and I went to a restaurant that was next door to the hotel where I was staying. And I got my seat, I sat there, my food came, and there was again my practice of gratitude. And something happened. Because in the midst of my gratitude for my meal, I began to understand, while on the one hand, I wasn't feeling necessarily abundant and all of that, that here I was eating in a restaurant. And the people who were around me that were serving me, a part of their well-being and their livelihood depended upon me being a customer there. So what money that I had that came out of my abundance to pay for the food at the restaurant was going on to be a part of their salary and to be a part of the things that they were doing in life. The kids they were educating, the clothes they were buying, the rent or mortgage that they were paying, all of those things there. And then I started thinking about the food that was before me and what it took for it to get there. And I started thinking about the distributors and the manufacturers and all of the people that went into making the meal that before me was possible. And I started thinking about how on the one hand, it might seem like something small. On the other hand, it was something significant. How we are all interconnected. And when we learn how to express gratitude, when we learn how to understand with one another that we are connected, and be appreciative for the connections and appreciative for the change and be appreciative for all of the things that are there, it helps us to understand just how powerful expressing gratitude is. And then I think about how the master teacher Jesus in a couple of places where it tells us he was facing something that seemed to be impossible. And yet, right before what some people would call a miracle takes place, he does what? He expresses gratitude. If you remember the story about him there before the multitudes, he'd been teaching, and the disciples said, it's time for them to go. We need to let them go and get something to eat. And he says, you give them something to eat. And so he sends them out to gather what they could, and all there were 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And what I like to point out to people is that in those days, there were no Long John Silvers or Soulfish or Catfish Cabin or anything like that. There were 2 small pickled fish, and the loaves of bread were barley loaves, and those are the poorest form of bread that you can find. But it tells us that he took that and he gathered it and he did something, which is before he distributed or anything else, he gave thanks. When Lazarus was laying in the tomb and dead, and his sisters had jumped on Jesus saying, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And it says that Jesus ignored all of that. And before he called Lazarus' name, he said, thanks. Thanksgiving is important. And when I was learning to become a practitioner in religious science, and we were learning affirmative prayer, and I remember when I was going before my practice panels, thank God it wasn't my real panels reading, but the practice panel, sat for a moment or stood for a moment or whatever else it is, and we've got the realization that God is all there is, and the recognition that God is all there is, the realization for what it is that we wish to have experienced in our lives and to unfold, knowing that it's already done in the mind of God. There's a period, a point at which faith kicks in, gratitude kicks in, thanksgiving kicks in, knowing kicks in that it's already done in the mind of God, and we are thankful. At that moment, we are thankful and we are grateful. That kind of thankfulness and that gratefulness that can well up in you for no reason other than that God is good, that life is good, that all is good, that all is well. Gratitude. I like to say an attitude of gratitude, a sense of thankfulness, an inclination toward appreciation. All of those things this day and for the following days, I wish for you to experience, because there's power in appreciation. There's power in gratitude. There's power in thankfulness. Thanksgiving is not just one day a year. It's every day. Every day we are here on this planet, on this side. We ought to be grateful and thankful. It might not be like you want it to be right now. Might be some things are not going the way you wish they would. But in everything, give thanks. There's power. You have that power. Attitude of gratitude, a sense of thankfulness, an inclination toward appreciation. It's yours. As I say to you, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. And so it is.